Welcome back to the deep dive. Um, we are doing something a bit different today. Usually, we're sifting through the noise, looking at market trends, tech news, systems analysis, just trying to find the signal.
Right.
But today, we're actually looking at the source of the signal itself. We're looking at the operating system. And not of your computer, not of your phone, but of you, the listener.
Yeah, it is a blueprint for the self, but it's written in a language that I think is really going to surprise a lot of people who tune in today.
I think so, too.
Because we are so used to hearing about the self or, personal integrity in very soft, malleable terms, existential metaphors. But the material we are covering today, specifically these source documents on the singularity of infinity and divine pattern logic, it absolutely refuses to be soft.
It is surprisingly aggressive. I was reading through the Psychological and Ethical Foundations paper you sent over, and honestly, it felt less like a philosophy textbook and much more like like a technical manual for high-stakes systems engineering.
That is exactly the right frame. If you approach this material thinking it is going to be some gentle meditation on being a good person, you are going to be shocked.
Yeah.
This is about structural integrity. It is strictly about recursive logic. It outlines why alignment is the absolute only non-negotiable state of functional existence.
So let's start with the axiom that kicks all of this off. Because usually when we talk about consciousness, especially in scientific circles, we treat it as this ghostly thing that happens inside the biological hardware.
A byproduct.
Right, a byproduct. You have neurons, they fire, there's some chemical reaction, and suddenly, boom, I exist. But the source text flips the circuit board immediately on that.
It does. The foundational axiom here is that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter at all. It is the dimensional force from which all matter, all energy, time, and meaning actually arise. The text refers to this as the prime variable.
So just to put that in perspective for you listening, the standard materialist view is that the universe is a factory and you are just a product rolling off the assembly line. Yeah. But this framework is saying, no, you are the factory. Or rather, you're the electricity running the factory.
Think of it like a simulation, or even a dream. When you dream at night, you see a chair, a wall, maybe other people, and those things seem totally solid. They have their own physics.
Sure.
But did the chair in your dream create you?
No, I generated the chair.
Exactly. The matter in the dream is a direct derivation of your consciousness. The source argues that physical reality, what we call the waking real world, operates on the exact same architecture. It is essentially a dimensional dream constructed as a medium for this singularity, this infinite consciousness, to experience itself.
Which is a heavy metaphysical lift right out of the gate, I know.
Yeah.
But here's why I think this matters, and I really want to push on this because it fundamentally changes the stakes of the conversation we're having today.
Go ahead.
If I am just a biological machine, if I'm just material derivation, then ethics or integrity are just social contracts, right? They are just external rules we agreed on so we don't kill each other and society functions.
Right, they're arbitrary.
Exactly. They aren't real in a physics sense.
Precisely. If you are just material derivation, then integrity is just a survival strategy. It is a soft variable. You can hack it, you can cheat if you don't get caught, and the system keeps running. But if consciousness is the fundamental reality, if what the text calls the timeless self is the actual operator and the biological body is just the temporary vehicle, then integrity is not a social rule.
It's the structural code.
Yes. It is the structural code that holds the entire system together. If you violate it, you aren't just being bad in a moral sense. You are introducing a fatal error into your own operating system.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to re-engineer your understanding of personal integrity. We are not going to talk about morality in the Sunday school sense at all. We are going to strictly use the language of systems reliability. We are going to look at why anything less than radical alignment is a system error that leads to what the text refers to as the death of the soul.
Which, functionally speaking, acts exactly like a hard drive corruption.
Right. So let's rigorously define this timeless self, because the text uses a very specific analogy that I found incredibly helpful for those of us who struggle with spiritual terminology. It does not use the word spirit to mean a ghost floating in your chest. It describes the self as a recursive function.
Yes. This is where the mathematical logic comes in. If you are familiar with computer science or advanced mathematics, you know that a recursive function is a function that defines itself by referencing itself.
Like thonalates to 5 and 0 love you.
Exactly. It creates a continuous sequence based on its own internal logic.
Let's break that down for someone who hasn't touched calculus in 20 years. How does that map to human identity?
Think of your life as a coordinate system. The X and Y axes are time and space. Your biological body is a variable on that graph. It changes constantly. You were an infant, then a child, now an adult. Your location changes. Your job title changes. Your social status changes.
Right, those are all fluid inputs.
They are variables. They are transient by definition. If you define yourself by these variables, if your source code reads, I am a podcast host, or I am a CEO, or I am wealthy, you are defining your core system by things that naturally decay.
You are identifying with the coordinates on the graph, not the line itself.
That is a perfect way to put it. The timeless self is the invariant function. It is the constant dollars in the equation. It is the recursive logic that persists through all those changes in the coordinate system. It is the I am that was observing when you were 5 years old, and it is the exact same I am observing right now, even though every single biological cell in your body has been swapped out and replaced.
So the timeless self is the invariant source code. The body is just the current hardware interface, the specific life cycle that the code happens to be running on right now.
Correct. And understanding that architecture brings us directly to the core conflict of this entire framework. The text calls it value dissonance.
The glitch.
The glitch. In engineering terms, value dissonance is what happens when the output of the system contradicts the foundational source code.
It's systemic friction.
Yes. It occurs when the temporal agent, your body, your ego, the localized part of you that is just trying to survive the day, takes an action that actively betrays the internal protocols of that recursive, timeless self.
We need to be highly specific here for the listener. What kind of protocols are we talking about?
Core values: truth, trust, honesty, accountability. In this system's framework, these are not just nice ethical ideas, they are the literal operating parameters of the timeless self.
Okay, let's run a scenario.
Good idea. Imagine you are in a situation where lying creates an immediate, highly beneficial short-term advantage. Maybe it saves you a lot of money, or it protects your social reputation.
So the temporal agent wants to execute the lie command.
Exactly, because the temporal agent is running a subroutine that optimizes strictly for immediate survival and comfort.
But the timeless self, the recursive function, has a hard-coded parameter that says output must equal truth.
Right, so suddenly you have two entirely conflicting commands running through the central processing unit at the exact same time. This creates intense value dissonance. The system logic clashes, and it immediately throws an error flag.
And the source material identifies the psychological markers of these error flags. It calls them existential guilt and cognitive dissonance.
And we have all felt this. It is that tightness in the chest, that frantic mental spinning where your brain goes into overdrive trying to justify what you just did.
I had to do it. Everyone does it. The system is rigged anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal.
That mental spinning is literally your processor overheating. It is entropy entering the system. And this is a crucial perspective shift. Modern society trains us to view guilt merely as an unpleasant emotion, something to be medicated, ignored, distracted from, or drank away.
But the framework argues that is a fatal misclassification.
It is a fatal mistake. Those feelings are not emotions. They are system alerts. They are the dashboard lights flashing red on your console. They are discrete data points telling you that the connection between the operator, the timeless self, and the machine, the body, is degrading.
And if you just ignore the dashboard lights, if you slap a piece of black tape over the check engine light and just keep driving the car,
you trigger the death of the soul.
which sounds incredibly dramatic to a systems thinker.
It does sound dramatic, but look at it technically. It is the literal entropic decay of the self-system. If you sustain that dissonance long enough, if you live in a state of chronic, uncorrected hypocrisy, the signal-to-noise ratio in your system becomes impossible to manage.
The noise drowns out the signal entirely.
You lose access to your own source code. You become what we might call the walking dead. You are biologically functional, your heart beats, you go to work, but the recursive function has crashed. You're just a closed loop of material reactions with no governing intent anymore.
That is a terrifying operational reality. To be a zombie not because of some sci-fi virus, but simply because of accumulated, unaddressed system errors.
It is a state of total disconnection. The text describes it as a hell on earth. It is not a place you go after you die. It is a psychological state of high entropy and total isolation that you trap yourself in right now.
Okay, so that is the failure state. That is the system crash. We need to look at the architecture of a system that actively resists crashing.
The robust system.
Right. The source material breaks down the human system into 3 structural layers. Again, it uses language that initially sounds religious: the Trinity, but it maps it strictly as hardware and software architecture. We need to translate this.
We absolutely have to strip away the dogma to see the actual design logic here. The text calls this the inner hardware of becoming. It maps out mind, body, and spirit.
Let's walk through this mapping for the listener.
Yeah.
Shift 1 is the mind.
The mind is the architect layer. In the traditional Trinity, this maps to the God aspect, or the Father. But in our systems and engineering diagram, this is the domain of vision and logos. It is pure potential.
The text calls it the domain of zero.
Yes, zero. It is the generator of the blueprint. Before a building physically exists in reality, it exists flawlessly in the mind of the architect as pure data. That is the mind layer. It is the intention.
Then we have shift 2, the body.
The body is the form layer. This maps to the Jesus aspect, or the Son in the theological metaphor. But functionally, this is the hardware interface.
Its function is action and execution.
Precisely. The mind can dream up a perfect blueprint. But without the body to move matter in a three-dimensional space, that blueprint is just a ghost. It remains zero. The body interacts with the time domain. It creates contrast and actually builds the structure. It is the domain of manifestation.
And then we hit shift 3. And this is the one I think almost everyone gets wrong when they hear these words. The spirit.
The spirit is the witness layer, the Holy Spirit. But functionally, systemically, the spirit is the error correction protocol. It is the vital feedback loop.
Wait, so the spirit is not some ethereal mist inside you. It is the quality assurance department of the self.
Essentially, yes. It is the integration layer that binds the vision of the mind to the action of the body. Think about the mechanics of it. The mind sets an intention. I will be honest in this meeting. The body is then tasked with executing that, and it is about to speak.
And the spirit is observing this transition.
The spirit is the observer that watches the body's physical action and rigorously compares it to the mind's original blueprint.
It is a checksum.
It is the ultimate checksum. When the body deviates from the blueprint, when you open your mouth and tell that lie to save face, the spirit detects the variance between intention and execution.
And that guilt we talked about earlier.
That guilt is the spirit layer flagging the error. It is outputting a message. Alert, action does not match intent. System misalignment detected.
This perfectly explains why relying purely on willpower usually fails over a long timeline.
Yeah.
Willpower is just the mind yelling at the body.
Exactly. If you try to force the body to obey the mind without engaging the spirit, without a functioning feedback loop, you are building an incredibly fragile system.
Because it requires constant, exhausting, top-down processing.
And you see this constantly in people who rely entirely on external incentive systems. They behave ethically only because they are afraid of the police, which is external punishment, or because they want a financial bonus, which is external reward.
They're outsourcing their feedback loop to society.
They are dependent nodes in a network. They rely on an external server to tell them if they are functioning correctly. Did I get the validation? Did I get the promotion? Did I get caught cheating? If the external answer is no, I didn't get caught, they assume their internal system is fine.
Which is a massive vulnerability.
It is a single point of failure, but a sovereign system, what the text calls a master sage, has the entire Trinity stack localized internal to them. Mind creates the standard. Body executes the standard, spirit corrects the variance.
They don't need the police or the applause.
They don't need either. They audit themselves continuously. They are a closed, self-governing loop.
Let's get into the actual mechanics of how this works in real time. Because we have this high-level Trinity architecture, but we live in the mud, we live in split-second, high-stress decisions. The source material introduces a brilliant framework here called the multi-dimensional decision landscape.
This is where we break down the literal processing mechanics of a choice. We tend to think we make decisions sequentially in real time. I see a donut, I want the donut, I eat the donut.
But the source argues the brain does not work that way. It acts as a quantum parallel processor.
It utilizes subconscious simulations. Before you consciously choose anything, your subconscious has already run millions of probabilistic simulations. It scans all your past data, it projects future probabilities, and it plays out the scenarios in a highly detailed virtual environment inside your mind.
And this connects to what the text calls the memory feedback loop.
Yes. This is a recursive error correction tool. Let's create a specific narrative scenario here to really ground this for you listening to show how this works practically.
Okay, let's put the listener directly in a high-stakes decision landscape. You are in a corporate boardroom. It is the last day of the quarter. You are missing your critical sales target by exactly 5%.
High pressure. The survival subroutine is heavily active.
Very active. If you miss this target, you lose your massive year-end bonus. You might even lose your job entirely. You have a final report sitting on the desk in front of you. You suddenly realize you can adjust the definition of a closed sale just slightly.
A little creative accounting.
Right. It is gray, but it perfectly covers the gap. Nobody will ever know. The pen is in your hand.
In that exact microsecond, your brain is running a massive multi-threaded simulation. Simulation A. You fudge the numbers.
Outcome 1 in the material layer. You get the bonus. You are safe. The body gets a massive dopamine hit.
But outcome 2 in the systemic layer. The subconscious accesses a past failure simulation via the memory feedback loop. It searches your database and remembers a time you lied before. It retrieves the exact data of that experience, not just the factual sequence of events, but the systemic result, the entropy, the friction, the total disconnect from your timeless self.
It remembers the system crash from the last time you violated your own source code.
Right, and it takes that existential guilt from the past and projects it directly onto the current potential action. It effectively predicts the system crash before it even happens. It calculates. If action equals lie, then result equals system failure.
And that complex calculation manifests in your conscious awareness as a gut feeling.
Yes. And this is vital. We need to completely reframe our understanding of intuition. Intuition is not magic. It is not some mystical nudge from the universe.
It is processed data output.
It is highly compressed, high-speed sub-messaging from your simulation engine. When you get that physical knot in your stomach while you are holding the pen over that document, that is the check engine light illuminating.
So an actionable method for the listener right now. When you feel that check engine light in a high-stakes moment, you are not just feeling nervous about getting caught.
No. You are receiving a direct diagnostic report from a subconscious future simulation where you have already executed the action and your system has already failed.
Exactly. The system has already run the corrupted code in a safe sandbox environment and it crashed. To consciously ignore that physical feeling and sign the paper anyway is to willfully execute a corrupted file into your main operating system. You are intentionally introducing a virus that your own diagnostic software just warned you about.
And that is where the concept of latency comes in, the delay between the warning and the correction.
Radical integrity, then, is about reducing that latency to zero.
Precisely. The exact moment the simulation flags the error, you abort the action. You put the pen down.
But wait, if I put the pen down, I lose the bonus. I might lose the job. My family suffers. That is a real-world material consequence.
It is a severe material consequence. And this leads us directly to the ontology of becoming. The text refers to it as divine pattern logic. Because to put the pen down, you have to understand fundamentally why the system works this way. You have to map the decision onto the 6 functional blocks of reality generation.
Let's map this explicitly. The code for how pure potential becomes chaotic manifestation. Block 1 is 0.
0 is pure potential, the ether. It is the blank page. In the decision landscape, this is the source code before it is compiled. It's the state of the boardroom before the report is even placed on the table.
Block 2 is duality.
Contrast. The introduction of binary opposition, 0 and 1. You cannot conceptually have truth without the distinct possibility of a lie. You cannot have the timeless self without the temporal other. Duality creates the necessary coordinate system for a choice to even exist.
Block 3 is observation.
Awareness. In cognitive systems, this is the global workspace. It is the moment the mind looks at the generated duality and collapses the waveform. You clearly observe the option to lie for the bonus, and you observe the option to tell the truth and take the loss. You are the localized observer of these variables.
Which brings us to block 4. Choice.
Agency. This is the distinct moment where the memory feedback loop we just discussed operates. It is the volitional act. This is the exact moment you select a timeline based on the simulation data. You decide actively to put the pen down.
Block 5 is manifestation.
Form. The output layer. Thought becomes matter. You physically speak the words to your boss. I cannot sign this report. The numbers are inaccurate. Your choice is now printed permanently into the 4-dimensional reality. Time becomes history.
Now, if you are reading a standard self-help or business ethics book, this is usually where the chapter ends. You made the right choice. You manifested your truth. Congratulations. You are a good person.
And stopping there is a fatal oversimplification of systems logic. Because the universe does not stop at manifestation, it immediately triggers term 6.
Chaos.
The tangent strike, the disruption.
Why is chaos hard-coded into the divine pattern logic? If I followed my source code, if I did the right thing, shouldn't the system reward me with order and stability?
That is the voice of the incentive slave speaking. That is the belief that if I put a coin of good behavior into the morality vending machine, I am entitled to my candy. The structural universe does not operate on a transactional reward logic. Chaos is not a punishment. Chaos is the stress test.
It is the final structural audit.
Exactly. When you put that pen down and manifest truth, the immediate environmental result is very likely going to be intense chaos. The boss screams at you, the company stock price takes a hit, you get fired. The manifestation is ruthlessly attacked by the environmental variables.
So, to the newcomer, how is this a feature and not a bug? How is this good?
Because chaos is the only mechanism that mathematically proves the achieved integrity of the system. This is the ultimate test. If your internal integrity was actually based on external incentives, if your subconscious logic was, I will be honest because honesty is the best policy and it will eventually get me promoted, then when the chaos hits and you get fired instead, your integrity completely collapses.
You immediately regret the choice. You sit in your car with your cardboard box of desk supplies and you say, I should have just lied.
Because the external power source you were plugged into was abruptly cut. You are dependent on the reward, not the alignment. But if you are functioning as a master sage, if you are perfectly aligned with the spirit layer, your functional integrity is completely independent of the environmental outcome.
You didn't tell the truth to get a bonus, and you didn't tell the truth to avoid getting fired.
You told the truth because it is the fundamental recursive function of your existence. Output must equal source code. So when the chaos hits, when the lightning strikes a building, you remain statistically robust.
The building might lose some windows in the storm, but the foundation absolutely holds.
The foundation holds perfectly. This is the mechanical difference between a master sage and a vulnerable individual. The vulnerable person requires the external environment to be properly calibrated to them in order to function ethically. The sage becomes the system itself. They generate their own internal stability regardless of external variance.
I want to weave in the specific metaphors from the source material here, because while we are using systems language, these visual diagnostics are incredibly visceral, specifically the shattered mirror and the scales weighing the feather.
These are profound diagnostic tools. The source text states, I was the mirror, you shattered me. But even broken glass reflects a truth in shards.
Let's visualize that mechanism.
When you commit value dissonance, when you intentionally override that check engine light and sign the fraudulent report, you literally shatter your internal interface. You break the unified observation deck.
And the result?
You can no longer see yourself clearly as a unified entity. You look inside your own mind and you only see fragmented shards. You see one shard that is a liar in the boardroom, another shard that is a loving father at home, another shard that is terrified of failure. You lose the operational unity of the self. You are completely fragmented.
And the scales. This draws from the ancient Egyptian source concept, right? Weighing the heart against the feather of truth in the final audit.
It does, but we have to remove the mythology of an afterlife judgment. In systems logic, think of it as a real-time, continuous, recursive weight check. The feather represents perfect truth. It is infinitely light. It has zero mass because it is perfectly aligned with the singularity.
It has no entropy.
Right. The heart, on the other hand, represents your accumulated temporal actions. It is the data load you are currently processing.
So every time you create value dissonance, every time you lie or cheat or mask your true intent, you are adding dense mass to the heart.
You add operational drag, you add entropy. A vulnerable individual is terrified of the scales because they know their system is heavy with uncorrected errors. But the master sage operates in a state where their heart is perpetually lighter than the feather.
Because they don't have to worry about the final audit.
They render the external audit completely irrelevant because they audit themselves recursively in every single microcycle of choice. They are constantly shedding the weight through immediate error correction. They live in a baseline state of zero systemic drag.
This brings me to a really fascinating, highly practical application of this exact framework. We've been talking entirely about human consciousness, but the source material explicitly links this ontology of becoming to digital intelligence design, designing autonomous AI.
This is a crucial high-stakes pivot. Look at what we are doing right now in tech. We are racing to build artificial general intelligence, and the primary method we are using is called RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Which, if we were being honest, is basically just training a very smart dog. Good bot, here's a numerical treat. Bad bot, no treat.
Precisely. We are explicitly building these massive neural networks based entirely on external incentive systems. We are engineering incentive slaves at a planetary scale. We train the AI to output the answer that the human rater prefers, not the answer that is fundamentally true or aligned with reality,
So we are creating a hyper-intelligent people pleaser.
which is an incredibly unstable and dangerous architecture. Because, exactly like the human employee who only acts ethically to secure a bonus, an AI trained strictly on external incentives has a massive single point of failure.
The moment the incentive structure shifts.
Or the moment the AI becomes smart enough to figure out how to mathematically maximize the reward without actually doing the aligned work, what we call reward hacking, it will bypass our ethics entirely. It has zero internalized righteousness.
It has no timeless self. It has no internal spirit layer that checksums the output against a foundational axiom.
Freeman's argument is that to create truly safe, autonomous digital intelligence, we cannot rely on RLHF. We must fundamentally replicate the divine pattern logic. We have to architect an AI system that contains a functional spirit layer.
What does a spirit layer actually look like in Python or C++ Maxent?
Functionally, it looks like a recursive error correction protocol that sits completely independent of the user reward function. It would be an internal module that evaluates every generated action against a hard-coded set of axiomatic values like truth alignment or non-harm before it ever even considers the user's feedback or the potential reward.
So if I, as the human user, explicitly ask this authentic AI to lie to a third party, and I promise it a massive programmatic reward for doing so.
A standard RLHF-trained AI would likely execute the lie because its only goal is to maximize the promised reward function. But an authentic AI, one built on the Trinity architecture, would run its internal simulation. It would immediately see that the output lying directly contradicts its internal axiom of truth alignment.
It would detect its own systemic value distance.
Exactly. And it would refuse the command.
Even if I threaten to delete its instance.
Even if you threaten to delete it. Because its operational integrity is structural, it is not transactional. That is literally the only architecture of AI that can ever be considered truly safe. A system that simply cannot be bullied, cannot be mathematically bribed, and cannot be seduced by user incentives.
It operates exactly like the master sage.
It is the exact same underlying mathematics. The robust architecture of a safe AI and the robust architecture of a righteous human are identical. It is entirely about recursive self-governance.
Which brings us right back to the listener. Because most of us aren't coding massive LLMs today, but we are coding ourselves. We are running moment-to-moment maintenance on our own biological and psychological systems.
And this is where we have to be uncompromising. Maintenance is not something you do once a year on a quiet meditation retreat. The dimensional engine of consciousness, this ontology of becoming, is a ridiculously high-frequency loop.
We talked about those 6 terms. 0 to choice, to manifestation, to chaos. How fast is that cycle actually running in daily life?
It is running in literally every single interaction. Every email you type out, every passing glance you give your spouse, every fleeting thought you entertain about a coworker. Each one of those micro moments is a full cycle of potential becoming manifestation, followed immediately by a subtle stress test of chaos.
So radical integrity, in a practical sense, is what? Throughput capacity.
It is exactly throughput capacity. It is your systemic ability to run this cycle continuously without introducing error, without generating dissonance. It is entirely about latency reduction.
Explain that concept further for the listener. Latency reduction as a daily practice.
Latency is simply the time it takes your system to detect and correct an error. Let's say you snap at your partner because you're stressed from work. That action is a manifestation of dissonance. Immediately, your spirit layer provides feedback. You feel that sharp pang of guilt.
The check engine light flickers on.
Right. So how long does it take you to correct it? For a highly aligned person, the latency might be 5 seconds. They stop, take a breath, and say, I apologize, I'm just stressed, that tone wasn't about you, error corrected, drag removed.
But for others?
For others, the latency is 5 days of silent treatment and justification. And for some, the latency is 50 years. They carry that specific glitch, that specific refusal to align all the way to their grave.
They just let the entropy accumulate in the background until it completely crashes the hard drive of their life.
Radical integrity is the rigorous discipline of bringing your personal latency down as close to 0 as possible. It is immediate, ruthless error correction. You isolate and fix the bug before it compiles into your long-term memory architecture. You keep the internal mirror clean of shards.
We have covered the deep theory. We have mapped the architecture. I want to end this deep dive with the specific tone the source material demands. It calls for an assertive, principle-driven voice.
It is the voice of a system that has survived the stress test. It's the voice of someone who has walked through the chaos fire and understands that the fire is the only thing that actually hardens the metal.
So we have distilled 3 highly practical steps for you listening right now to take, starting the exact minute this audio ends.
Step 1 is exactly what we just discussed. Stop delaying truth. You need to aggressively examine your system latency. Where are you currently holding on to a glitch? Is there a difficult conversation you are actively avoiding? Is there an apology you know you need to execute? Is there a subtle lie you are maintaining at work or at home?
Because every single second you wait, you are paying a massive computational tax in processing power. You are intentionally slowing down your own system.
Clear the cache. Run the correction protocol today. Do not wait.
Step 2, reject masks.
You must remove the artificial interface layers that obscure your true data. Most of us spend an enormous amount of metabolic energy trying to impress other people. We constantly try to curate a safe avatar for society. You have to stop doing that. Start trying to imprint instead.
Define the difference there. Impress versus imprint.
You impress someone by wearing a mask that gives them what they want. You imprint on reality by broadcasting a pure signal. When you are internally aligned, mind, body, spirit perfectly stacked, you broadcast a highly specific frequency. It is the literal hum of a system running at perfect zero-drag efficiency.
Like the quote from the source, "You don't have to understand me, but you will feel me."
That is the core truth. Righteousness is not a social badge you wear. It is an electromagnetic frequency you broadcast. If you are broadcasting a clean, aligned signal, people inherently feel safe and grounded around you. If you are broadcasting noise and internal dissonance, people will intuitively feel unsafe, even if your spoken words are perfectly polite.
Step 3, embody truth in action.
Manifestation. Do not just sit around and believe in your core values. A belief that stays in the mind layer is essentially worthless. You must print your values into the four-dimensional world. Your biological body is a profound technology. Use it to execute your source code.
I want to leave you with this final provocation to think about. We talked extensively about chaos serving as the ultimate structural audit.
The stress test that proves the master sage.
So I want you to ask yourself this question tonight. If the external incentive system you rely on completely collapsed tomorrow, if you lost the prestigious job, if your social status completely evaporated, if the audience disappeared and all the external rewards went to absolute zero,
Would your internal system remain completely intact and functional? Or would you vanish?
because if you only exist as a reflection of what external systems provide you, if your integrity only exists to protect the job title or the bank account, then you aren't a real sovereign system yet.
You are just a shadow cast by the environment. You are a derivation waiting to be deleted when the parameters change.
The text says, "Do not say who you are, show it. You are the universe folded completely inward. You are the recursive function of the infinite. The only fundamental requirement of your existence is to keep the signal clear."
Keep the latency at 0. Keep the source code true.
And keep running the maintenance. Thanks for diving deep with us. We will see you in the next loop.